Hello, I'm Steve Olson, the Manager of Training Services for Mesa. In this video, I'd like to share a little bit of what I've been working on recently using generative design and 3D printing. After spending a lot of time going through generative design tutorials and working on sample files, I really wanted an opportunity to use generative design to make something and then manufacture that, whether it be 3D printing or through some other method. And so I started thinking about what I could utilize around the house, and I thought about a hook to hang my laptop bag on. When I get in my home office here, I kind of just throw it on a flat surface, and it'd be really nice to have something to hang that on. And I thought this would be a good example, a simple problem that I could use generative design to solve and kind of then hopefully 3D print the object. So what I've kind of had initially was the idea of, okay, well, I need basically two places to hold it up with a screw and then something to hang the bag on. And so, the idea behind generative design is you have preserves that are part of the final design. So that's why I have these bodies here. I just model them up as bodies because it's just a little bit easier that way. And then after defining the problem, kind of running a few, phases to try to get the right design here, I realized, well, I actually don't have anything to define the loop on my bag or the handle on my bag that I hang on the hook. Because what was happening is the software was trying to connect this region with this region, which obviously wouldn't allow me to hang my laptop bag on there. So I actually added another body that's going to be an obstacle. It's just a kind of like a revolve there that would replicate that part of the backpack. And then I also incorporated basically a section of the wall that would be a boundary for the hook. So once I had that all defined, I was able to jump into generative design. So switching over to generative design, I basically just had to use the preserve and obstacle geometry commands to identify those. You'll see there's a couple other things in here that weren't there before, and what those are connector obstacles. So let me go into edit model here, and I have two connector obstacles that would represent the tools that I need to have access to connect this to the wall. So a screwdriver or something else. One of my iterations here, I had these the same size and I was having issues with the opening here at the top, so I made the larger one, or the upper one, just a little bit larger. But once I had that, those became obstacles as well. So then my load cases were fairly simple. I only figured I had one. That would be obviously the gravity and then the force. And in this case here, if I edit the force, you'll see that I have 50-pound force pushing on this surface down. And you might be thinking, Steve, 50 pounds, what kind of backpack do you have? I will say that I was starting with something a little bit more akin to the weight of the bag. I actually weighed it, kind of estimated that at more like probably about 10 pounds. But when I tried something that low, the solver had a little bit of trouble finishing the solve because it said the load was too light. So I was like, well, it doesn't hurt to over engineer this a little bit. So I just bumped it to 50 pounds, figuring that would be plenty. So that's the only load I have. And then the constraints are just to hold the two regions that are my preserves to the wall. Basically the center of the hole and the back face that is attached to the wall. Those are my constraints there. So also in terms of the manufacturing methods, I could tell it I wanted unrestricted, but I also told it additive, figuring that would be I'll probably maybe 3D print this because that would be probably the easiest method to make just one of these is to find someone to 3D print this or get my own 3D printer. So I figured I would do additive and kind of have it build in the y-axis. You can see here my view cube y runs to the part this way, figuring that would be probably the easiest way if it would build up from the back here. And then obviously I don't have any other manufacturing methods that I'd want to pursue. And then when it came to materials, I thought about what could I 3D print in, and so I thought, well, ABS plastic is part of the default material library here, and I can actually get someone to print in ABS because they do make ABS filaments. So I figured that would be a pretty safe bet to utilize. So I ran the study and I got my results here. So with only one manufacturing method and one material, it actually came out fairly, with just one result here, which isn't too bad. It looked pretty good. One thing that kind of changed over time here as well is the fact that initially I had didn't have the ability to assign symmetry. That was a newer function. They hadn't added to Fusion just yet, so I actually ran it again after they incorporated the symmetry function and it assigned that down the middle of my hook, because I thought that would be really great. I did create a design outcome from this using this blue button here, and that is this file over here. So you can see it kind of comes out pretty neat. It is editable in this case. I do have a free form that represents all of that geometry there. And also, before I forget about that, in here, if I finish the outcome view, finish the explore, underneath the, where was the, I'm trying to remember where they add the symmetry function, because again, it is relatively new. Yeah, here we go. Under design space, symmetry plane, again, I assign that right down the middle of the component. But here's the one that is symmetric. You can see it is pretty symmetrical. It does have the ability to be edited. Down here I have this organic freeform shape. If I go into here, I can edit. You can see the T-spline shape that I have full ability to modify and change. So after all that, I thought, oh, okay, I'm ready to 3D print this. But the more I thought about it, I was like, this preserve region is just a little bit too much. I thought maybe I over-designed it. Again, whenever you make something a preserve, it has to be part of the final design. I thought maybe I should try to reduce the area there and maybe create something a little bit more interesting. So I came up with this second edition. So all I did here is I kind of kept a little nub here at the end and this base feature here, and then I did try to sweep or loft just a smaller region that would still allow me to apply the force there. That was one of the things I was a little bit worried about, is making sure I had a surface that I could still apply the appropriate load to. So I kind of changed it to this, and nothing else really changed. Just changed that I ran the study, and I end up coming up with this, which I thought was a little bit more interesting, a little bit more compelling. Now, one thing that I did notice here is if you look at my timeline, this is not editable as it is. I might have to do some other ways of manipulating, but I thought this is a pretty interesting looking final design. Hopefully here I can get a 3D printer or find access to one that I can 3D print this, and once I do that, I can post a video of this being 3D printed and maybe even installed in action here. But I thought this was a really neat way to apply it. And maybe you've kind of done the same thing, but this is like a neat design study to kind of walk through the process. I know I learned a little bit more having to think through the process. I definitely found areas where it's like, oh, I didn't think of this obstacle, I have to have that. Loads was one scenario where just putting what I thought was an appropriate load on there in terms of how much weight the backpack would weigh when it was hanging on there was not enough to really get any kind of solvable solution to it. So I did have to kind of up that up a little bit there. But hopefully here in a couple weeks I can get myself access to a 3D printer, and I can print this out, and I can then share with you what the final results were. Well, that's all for now. Hopefully you're able to learn a little bit about generative design as I went through the process there of what I saw as I went through this design project. Hopefully you can use that knowledge as you approach your design projects, hopefully maybe using generative design. Check back at my channel here in a couple weeks. Hopefully I'll have the ability to 3D print this and have some sort of results to share with you. And as always, thanks for watching.